In America, knowing your rights should be enough to protect them. But sometimes it isn't. March 2025. Tucson, Arizona. A crowded train station. A normal evening. Danielle King, a 33-year-old tech analyst, sits quietly waiting for her train. No crimes. No chaos. Just headphones in and a bag at her feet until an officer walks up and asks to search her things. Danielle says no, calmly, legally. She knows her rights. But what happened next wasn't about law. It was about power. Handcuffed, detained, no warrant, no charges, no apology. And it would have ended there if someone across the platform hadn't hit record. One viral video, 500,000 views overnight, a civil rights lawsuit, and a police department scrambling to respond. This isn't just one woman's story. It's a case study in what happens when the law is treated like a suggestion and power is mistaken for authority. This is when power is abused, cops who forget the law isn't theirs. The Southern Pacific Rail Terminal in Tucson always buzzed in the early evening. The soundscape was a patchwork of conversations, train announcements, rolling luggage, and street musicians echoing off the concrete walls. On this March evening in 2025, the desert air still held a bit of winter crispness, and the station lights bathed the terminal in sterile white. Danielle King sat on a metal bench near track 3, earbuds in her backpack between her knees. She was scrolling through a tech blog on her phone, the screen light flickering across her calm face. At 33, Danielle had the quiet confidence of someone used to being underestimated, especially as a black woman in a white male-dominated tech world. A systems analyst from Phoenix, she had spent the past 2 days in Tucson attending a cybersecurity seminar and was heading home on the evening rail. It had been an ordinary week, until the moment she looked up. At first, she saw the figure out of the corner of her eye, tall, uniformed, and purposeful. Officer Beth Halvorson, Tucson PD. Late 40s, tightly pulled back blonde hair, mirrored sunglasses pushed up on her head, even though the sun had long dipped behind the desert mountains. Her boots clicked sharply as she approached. Danielle instinctively paused her music and pulled out one earbud. "Excuse me, ma'am," Halvorson said, her tone clipped but official. "We've had some reports of suspicious behavior near the lockers. Do you mind if I take a quick look in your bag?" Danielle blinked. Her eyebrows rose. "I haven't been near the lockers," she replied calmly. "Am I being detained?" Halvorson hesitated. "You're not under arrest. Just a simple bag check." Danielle's fingers tightened slightly around her phone. "Then I prefer not to have my personal belongings searched. I'm just waiting for my train." Around them, no one seemed to notice the tension building between the two women. People hurried to their destinations, dragging suitcases and sipping overpriced coffee. But for Danielle, the weight in the air had shifted. The officer's face didn't twitch, but her stance grew more rigid. "Ma'am," she said again, "refusing requests makes you look more suspicious." Danielle felt the tightrope beneath her. This was the moment women like her were taught to fear, where compliance might be safer, but silence would cost dignity. She took a breath and held her ground. "I know my rights," she said, "and unless you have probable cause or a warrant, I'm not consenting to a search." That was the turning point. Somewhere deep in Officer Halvorson's chest, something sparked, pride, annoyance, or simply the need to assert control. She glanced toward the security office and gave a subtle nod. Within moments, a second officer appeared, Officer Ramirez, mid-30s, silent, observant. He stood a few feet back, watching. Halvorson turned back to Danielle. "You're matching a description we received related to a theft reported 2 days ago. Black female, early 30s, with a dark backpack. We're just following up." Danielle gave a dry, tired laugh. "That's barely a description. You're describing half the people in this terminal." Halvorson's tone dropped just slightly. "You're being difficult, ma'am. We're trying to clear this up." Danielle said nothing. The crowd had thinned a bit. A few bystanders slowed their steps as they walked by, eyes flicking toward the interaction. A mother pulled her daughter slightly closer. A businessman made a wide arc around the scene. Danielle remained seated, visibly calm. Her hands were in full view. No sudden movements. No anger. Only clarity. "I'm not refusing to cooperate," she said evenly. "I'm asking what legal basis you have for searching me. That's all." Halvorson radioed dispatch. Her voice was professional, rehearsed. Possible match on the locker tip. Non-compliant. Requesting confirmation and ID check. Danielle opened her wallet, produced her Arizona driver's license, and handed it over without a word. Halvorson took it, scanned the info, then handed it to Ramirez. Then came the next blow. "I'm placing you in temporary detainment," Halvorson said, reaching for her cuffs, "until we can confirm your identity and contents of your bag." Danielle blinked slowly. "I am not resisting," she said, "but I want to speak to a lawyer. You can do that once we clear this up." The cuffs snapped around her wrists. The moment the metal clicked shut, time slowed. Danielle's backpack was unzipped. Officer Ramirez rifled through it as Halvorson kept watch. Out came a laptop, its lid dusty from use. A paperback novel, Margaret Atwood's The Testaments. A few chargers. A bag of trail mix. No weapons. No drugs. No stolen items. Nothing. And yet, the process continued. Danielle was led to the terminal, the cuffs digging slightly into her skin. No Miranda warning. No reading of rights. Just motion, protocol, and assumption. As she was placed in the back of the patrol car, she watched her train arrive in the distance, silver and humming, people boarding, others disembarking. The normal world, carrying on without her. She locked eyes with a young girl standing by the tracks, watching her through the window. The door closed. The train pulled away. The station where Danielle was taken wasn't far. 10 minutes west, off Grant Road. A bland, low-slung building with frosted windows and faded paint. Inside, it smelled like old coffee, air conditioning, and impatience. She was escorted into a small interview room. Gray walls, metal table, a mounted camera blinking silently in the corner. Officer Halvorson stood near the doorway, arms crossed. Danielle sat, wrists still bound, her mind cataloging everything. No one had read her rights. No one had called her an official suspect. She had been swept off a public platform, locked in a car, and deposited in a holding room. All without charge. Halvorson didn't speak. A younger officer, Detective Alvarez, entered. Early 30s, clean-shaven, trying to project command. "We're reviewing a few incidents involving the terminal lockers," he began. "Routine questioning. We'll release you shortly if everything checks out." Danielle raised her eyebrows. "Am I being detained?" Alvarez hesitated. "You're here for questioning." "Then I'd like to speak to an attorney." The pause stretched. "Do you have one?" "No, but I'll wait until I can contact one." Alvarez stood. "Suit yourself." The door clicked shut behind him. Danielle exhaled slowly. She was alone. Again. While Danielle sat in silence, Officer Halvorson was seated at a terminal, typing up her report. The cursor blinked over a blank section labeled Probable Cause. The locker report? There wasn't one. The description from 2 days ago? Vague, verbal, unfiled. No timestamps, no witnesses, no security footage tying Danielle to anything. But that didn't stop the narrative from growing. In her statement, Halvorson described Danielle as uncooperative, verbally defensive, and unwilling to clarify her movements. She used phrases like unresponsive, nervous demeanor, and possible flight risk. But the body cam footage, rolling the entire time, told a different story. Danielle had been measured, calm, articulate. Her tone never rose. Her voice never cracked. She didn't run. She didn't resist. She simply said no. And in the mind of an officer who had grown used to immediate obedience, that was enough. 3 hours later, the door reopened. A female officer entered with keys. "You're free to go." No apology. No explanation. No receipt for the violation of her rights. Danielle stood. Her bag, tossed carelessly into a corner, had been disturbed, its contents scrambled. Her laptop was scratched. Her novel was bent. Her trail mix had spilled. She said nothing. She walked out into the cold desert night, alone. The street outside was empty except for a few flickering streetlights. The rail station was closed. Her train long gone. She found a rideshare home, paid the $86 fare herself. The digital receipt will be the only proof she'd ever been there. It could have ended there. It almost did. But a college student named Evan, Lee had caught the entire encounter on his phone from across the platform. He uploaded the video to TikTok with a caption, "Lady gets cuffed at Tucson station for saying no." The video went viral in less than 24 hours. 500,000 views by morning. Comments ranged from outrage to disbelief. She literally did nothing wrong. Tucson PD about to get cooked. Saying no isn't a crime. By noon the next day, the footage was on Reddit, Twitter, and local news sites. Civil liberties groups took notice. One tweet from the Arizona ACLU read, "Refusing a warrantless search is a constitutional right. Full stop." Suddenly, Danielle King had become a symbol. The Tucson Police Department scrambled. A public information officer released a brief statement. "We are aware of the video circulating on social media. The matter is under internal review." Officer Halvorsen was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The union immediately issued a response defending her actions. Terms like protocol-driven stop and reasonable suspicion appeared in the statements, though none held up under legal scrutiny. Internal Affairs quietly opened a case file. Behind closed doors, people were nervous. Danielle? She stayed silent, for now. She hadn't spoken to reporters. She hadn't filed a lawsuit, but she had written a detailed, time-stamped personal record. Names. Times. Every sentence she remembered. Every moment she stayed still, while her dignity was dissected on a public platform. 2 weeks after the incident, Danielle received a letter from the Tucson PD. It was 2 pages long, cold, formal, and distant. It said, "Following review of incident footage and officer conduct, we have determined the situation involved procedural missteps. The department has initiated corrective measures and officer training. No apology, no admission, no restitution." Danielle read it once, folded it, and placed it in her desk drawer beneath her seminar notes. Then she picked up her phone and made her first call to a civil rights attorney. The call Danielle made wasn't emotional. It was meticulous. She spoke with Asha Mehta, a civil rights attorney out of Phoenix, known for challenging unlawful detainments and unconstitutional stops. Asha listened quietly for 15 minutes, occasionally asking questions. At the end of the call, her voice was clear. "You have a case, and a strong one." The lawsuit was filed 2 weeks later. King versus City of Tucson, Officer Beth Halvorsen, and does 1-3. It alleged unlawful detainment, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, and emotional distress. When the local media caught wind of the filing, the story flared up again, now not as a viral video, but a legal action. Danielle finally agreed to appear for a single interview with a Tucson outlet. Wearing a gray blouse and no makeup, she sat in front of a plain backdrop and simply said, "I knew my rights. I wasn't aggressive. I didn't raise my voice. I said no. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't a performance. It was a boundary. And America took notice. Not everyone wanted Danielle to be a symbol." Within days of her lawsuit, thinly veiled stories began popping up on small blogs and niche news sites. Who is Danielle King really? One claimed she'd been fired from a job 6 years earlier, a misleading half-truth. Another suggested she had a history of erratic behavior, citing a neighbor dispute in college over parking. Someone was digging, and they weren't trying to inform. They were trying to discredit. Danielle's attorney, Asha, recognized the play immediately. "They're trying to shape public perception before depositions begin," she said, forwarding one of the hit pieces to her client. "It's not about truth. It's about noise." But Danielle didn't respond. She didn't tweet. She didn't write a blog post. She didn't argue in the comments. She stayed steady, just like on the platform. 2 months after the incident, the Tucson PD was forced to release the full body cam footage under a public records request. It showed everything. Officer Halvorsen approaching Danielle with a casual tone. The request. The refusal. The escalation. The moment she radioed for backup despite no sign of aggression or threat. The moment she lied. Female subject is refusing to comply. Looks jumpy. Possibly under influence. Requesting backup. The footage showed Danielle sitting, legs crossed, calmly stating, "I prefer not to have my things searched." The video spread like fire. On YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, political commentators from both left and right began weighing in. One civil rights scholar said on MSNBC, "This is not about one cop or one woman. It's about a system that's trained to equate noncompliance with guilt. That's dangerous." Public pressure mounted. The Tucson Police Department announced a policy overhaul. Officers would receive new training on the limits of voluntary searches. A task force on constitutional compliance was formed. None of it changed what happened to Danielle, but it acknowledged that it wasn't nothing. Officer Halvorsen, meanwhile, retained legal counsel. Her union backed her publicly, but advised silence. Behind closed doors, her stance was clear. She believed she had acted on instinct, that Danielle had given off signals. Her statement to investigators included the words, "gut feeling." That phrase appeared in the press and lit another fire. Danielle's attorney responded in a public statement. Gut feelings are not legal standards. The Constitution doesn't bend to hunches. As the legal case progressed, Danielle returned to her life. Kind of. The tech company she worked for allowed her to continue remotely. Her social circles became smaller, her phone quieter. Some colleagues offered support. Others awkwardly avoided the subject. "Why are you putting yourself through this?" One friend asked over Zoom. Danielle stared into the camera. "Because if someone like me, calm, law-abiding, educated, can be treated like a threat for saying no, what happens to someone who doesn't have my privileges?" Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes darkened. It wasn't about personal vindication anymore. It was about systemic rot. Danielle's case didn't just go viral. It inspired others. A woman in Santa Fe came forward with a similar incident from a parking lot. A teenager in Kansas uploaded footage of being frisked after asking why he was stopped. Civil rights lawyers across the country reported an uptick in potential clients referencing the woman in Tucson. Some activists began calling the platform principle the right to stand still, say no, and walk away. For once, the narrative didn't dissipate after the headlines. It stuck. Even law schools began discussing the case as a modern study in passive resistance and the limits of state authority. And still, Danielle remained out of the spotlight. She didn't want to become a movement. She just wanted her rights back. Danielle sat in a conference room with one microphone, two attorneys, and a stenographer. Across the table, Officer Halvorsen, her face unreadable, her union lawyer's stone face beside her. The deposition wasn't about apologies. It was about record. When you asked to search her bag, what probable cause did you believe you had? I believe her behavior was suspicious. And what, specifically, about her behavior raised suspicion? She seemed nervous. She was alone. She didn't want to comply. Is refusing a search considered probable cause under the Fourth Amendment? A pause. Not by itself. Danielle didn't look at Halvorsen. Not because she was angry, because she didn't need to. The facts were louder than either of them. The city attorneys reached out weeks later. A settlement offer. $220,000 and a signed acknowledgement that Danielle's rights had been violated, though without admission of wrongdoing by the officer or department. A separate memo proposed internal policy reviews and voluntary retraining, though not mandatory discipline. Danielle and Asha reviewed the terms in silence. "It's not everything we wanted," Asha said, "but it's a beginning, and they want to go away quietly, which means they know they lost." Danielle nodded, slowly. "Take it." She wasn't looking to become the face of a decade-long civil battle. She was looking to put the incident behind her. Without losing the principle she stood on, the acknowledgement mattered more than the cash. But silence was never an option again. Officer Halvorsen was not fired. She was placed in a non-public-facing administrative role, desk duty, and quietly removed from patrol rotation. The department issued a memo reinforcing that voluntary searches are not tools of compliance, and mandating refresher training in constitutional protocol. Internally, some officers grumbled. Others supported the move. "You can't police if people don't trust you," said one lieutenant anonymously. "And you can't demand trust when you punish people for knowing the law." Halvorsen filed a complaint with the union, claiming the reassignment was politically motivated. It went nowhere. The department had drawn its line. Danielle didn't spend the money. Not all of it, anyway. She donated part to civil liberties nonprofits, funded a legal literacy seminar series in Arizona high schools, and tucked the rest into a savings account she never talked about. But money didn't erase the anxiety. She still hesitated when uniformed officers passed. She avoided train stations whenever she could, and loud voices, especially those saying, "Ma'am, stop," made her shoulders tense involuntarily. One therapist she spoke to called it residual vigilance. Another called it rational fear. Danielle called it what was damage, and she carried it with quiet dignity. 6 months after the lawsuit settled, Danielle gave a talk at a civil rights conference in Seattle. It wasn't flashy. She wore jeans and a cardigan, walked up to the mic without a PowerPoint, and told her story in 12 minutes. "I didn't stand up to be brave. I stood up because I was afraid of what happens when we don't. Saying no shouldn't cost you your liberty. But it did, and it does, every day." When she finished, no one clapped right away. They stood. She looked out over the auditorium, lawyers, students, survivors, activists, and for the first time since that day on the train platform, she felt safe. Not because she was protected, because she had nothing left to prove. Officer Halvorsen eventually retired early, taking a severance package negotiated by the union. Her file remained sealed, and no formal disciplinary record followed her into retirement. She never apologized. Danielle never expected her to. What mattered more was a ripple. The new internal policies, the public training videos that now cited her case, the law school mock trials that used King versus Tucson as a case study, and the hundreds of people, online, in person, quietly in inboxes, who told Danielle she helped them say no. This video is based on real events and public records. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Some names and details have been changed for privacy and clarity. The content discusses themes of police misconduct and civil rights violations. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is intended for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. If you're captivated by real-life mysteries and chilling crime stories, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. There's so much more to uncover, and you won't want to miss a single case.